Welcome to Stories That Touch, where even the simplest stories can stir something profound in the soul tonight. I want to take you on a journey not of fairy tale magic, but of a real storm, a bark in the rain, and an ordinary dog who did something extraordinary. This story is about loyalty, a mother's love and hope, the kind that flickers quietly yet shines through the darkest nights. If you've ever believed that sometimes the smallest creatures, the ones who can't speak, turn out to be the greatest heroes, then this story is for you. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you don't miss more stories that move your heart, because here we share goodness, the kind that proves love, trust, and courage can change everything. Thank you for being here, and thank you for believing in kindness. That night carried a weight in the air. A storm rolled in like a runaway train at St. Meadow Regional Hospital, a quiet small-town facility on the city's outskirts. Lightning split the sky in jagged flashes, and thunder shook the windows like distant drums. Nurses moved steadily through their night shift, soft steps echoing on tile floors, voices low as they adjusted IVs and monitored heartbeats. It was the kind of quiet that often comes right before something unexplainable happens. And then it did, 47 a.m. The automatic doors to the ER entrance slid open. No bell, no ambulance. A figure stepped in from the rain. A dog. Large, black, soaked to the bone with mud caked on its paws and a limp in its step. Water pooled beneath it as it walked in silence. No bark, no growl, just a gaze that seemed to search for something or someone. "What the heck?" a staffer whispered, but Nurse Haley Quinn didn't answer. Her eyes weren't locked on the dogs. They were fixed on what the bus was holding in its mouth, a tattered, soaked jacket loosely bundled, and from inside a sound. A cry, weak, fragile, human. Haley's blood turned cold. "No way," she gasped, then louder. "Oh my God!" She rushed toward the dog. It didn't flinch. Gently, it laid the bundle on the floor, as if it had been trained to do this. Its whole life inside was a baby, tiny pale lips trembling. Wrapped in that wet jacket, the baby breathed in shallow, almost invisible puffs. Time froze outside. Lightning cracked again. Then chaos erupted. "Get the infant, crash cart," someone shouted. "Newborn, critical condition." Doctors and nurses surged forward. Haley cradled the child, feeling the icy skin. The dog, still drenched, stood silent, eyes locked on the baby, and suddenly everyone understood. It hadn't come here by accident. It had come for the child. And because of that dog, the baby was still alive. Shadow, no one knew where it came from. No one understood how it had reached the hospital that stormy night. But under the hospital's harsh fluorescent lights, with its black coat matted and muddy, one thing was clear. It had carried something priceless. It had limped for miles, bleeding from its left leg, until it reached the front doors of St. Meadow Regional at an hour when no one expected anything but silence. And in its mouth was hope, wrapped in an old coat, crying softly like a candle, trying to stay lit. Nurse Haley Quinn was the first to act, still adjusting to the rhythms of this small-town hospital. So different from the city she had left behind. So different from the place where she had lost her baby boy during a delivery that went wrong, a moment that she'd never forgiven herself for. When the dog gently placed the bundle on the floor, Haley felt her heart stop. A baby, no more than 3 months old, skin bluish, lips cracked and dry, tiny limbs curled from the cold, severely dehydrated. "We need trauma room now," Haley shouted, her arms trembling as she scooped the infant up. That's when Dr. Lewis Park appeared, stoic, stern, and known for never letting emotion interfere with his work. But Haley knew better. She'd seen him save patients others had given up on. She once heard him say, "As long as there's a heartbeat, we fight." She met his eyes as she passed him, the baby. Cold heartbeats, weak. He's barely holding on. "We're not letting him go," Dr. Park replied, already barking orders. "4 fluids, warming blankets. Oxygen." The ER came alive, no longer quiet. There was the hum of machines, the clatter of tools, and the weak heartbeat blip on the monitor. Outside the trauma room window, the nameless, tagless, limping dog lay still. It didn't bark, it didn't leave. It just watched, like a soul waiting for an answer. Haley worked through the tears building in her throat. That baby, he reminded her of her son, the one she once cradled like this, tiny, fragile, needing a miracle that never came. "Maybe this is my second chance," she thought, "not to be a mother, but to save a child." "Is the baby okay?" a nurse whispered. "Too soon to say." Dr. Park answered, eyes glued to the monitor. But he's fighting. 3 hours later, the boy was stable. Rehydrated, warm, sleeping. His little chest rose and fell, slow but steady. Haley stepped out of the trauma room. Hart still nodded and walked toward the glass doors where the dog waited. She crouched beside it. You brought him here. Why? Who told you to? How did you know where to go? The dog tilted its head, eyes sunken but bright, as if it understood every word. Haley reached out and touched its soaked, tired fur. It whimpered softly but didn't pull away. When she lifted its left paw, she saw the wound, a long gash, swollen and raw. Oh, God, you're hurt too, she murmured, emotion cracking in her voice. You saved him, and no one even knows your name. A few hours later, police arrived. The questions came fast. Where did the baby come from? Who left him? Where did the dog come from? No one had answers. Park looked at the dog, then back at the baby in recovery. We should name him. Shadow, Haley said without hesitation, like the name had been waiting the moment he stepped through those doors, because he came out of the darkness, carrying hope. 3 days later, the baby was recovering. Police still hadn't found the mother, but the community had taken notice. A local paper ran a story called Shadow, the Dog That Found Light. Dr. Park wasn't the sentimental type, but as he passed the recovery room and saw Haley holding the baby Shadow asleep at her feet, he paused. You thinking of adopting the doll? He asked. Haley looked up. I'm not sure who saved who, doctor. He nodded slowly. Maybe. You both needed saving. That night, Haley sat with Shadow on the hallway bench. She stroked his head, her eyes softer than they had been in years. You know, Shadow, she whispered, some things feel lost forever. And then one night a soaking wet dog shows up and brings them back. And Shadow, as if he understood it all, let out a soft sigh and rested his head on her leg with a heart still beating for the baby. And the woman learning how to love again, while the medical team was neck deep in their fight to save a life. Shadow, the muddy, injured, rain-soaked black dog, sat perfectly still outside the emergency room doors. The glass pane separated the inside world from him, but Shadow didn't whine. He didn't bark. He didn't move an inch. He just sat there, eyes glinting with each heartbeat, staring through the doors like praying. A young nurse walking by paused and looked at him. That dog, has he been sitting there this whole time? Haley had just stepped out, sweat on her brow, exhaustion in her bones. She heard the question. She looked at Shadow, and something tugged tight in her chest. Not because he was a strange dog, not even because he had brought a baby, but because he hadn't left. He knows where the baby is, Haley said quietly, and he's not going anywhere until he knows the baby's okay. Shadow, she called. The name came without thinking. He lifted his head, silent, not excited or afraid, just focused like he was keeping a promise. Hey, you little angel, Haley said, kneeling beside him, her voice soft like she was soothing a lost soul. You brought that baby to the right place. I don't know how, but you did. She reached out gently. Shadow didn't flinch. He let her touch his wet, tangled fur. Beneath it, she could feel the faint trembling of a body pushed far past exhaustion. Inside the ER, the tension was thick. Cold skin, stiff limbs, severe dehydration. Likely abandoned for at least 48 hours. Dr. Park muttered, checking the vitals and adjusting the IV. We must raise the core temperature 2 more degrees in 30 minutes, if not... He didn't finish the sentence. Haley had just walked back in and caught enough to feel her heart freeze. Any progress, she asked. Not yet, but the baby's still fighting, and I can't understand how the dog knew. It's like he was sent here. Haley bit her lip, staring at the weak pulse line on the monitor. Maybe someone left the baby near the industrial lot and the dog found him. But it still doesn't explain why he brought him here, she whispered. Clutching the blanket, Dr. Park gave a slight nod. I've seen strange things before, but those eyes on that dog, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old enough to believe in things like that. Haley smiled faintly, her eyes still red. Sometimes, miracles come in the most unexpected forms. A few patients and staff had started noticing Shadow in the hallway. A little boy carried past by his mom pointed and whispered, Mommy, that dog looks like it's guarding something. The mother held her son tighter, watching Shadow. Silent, brave, never taking his eyes off the ER doors as some invisible lifeline ran from the baby inside. To him, 30 minutes passed. Haley walked out tired, but with a hint of light in her face, she knelt beside Shadow, gently stroking his head. He's stabilizing. Shadow, still weak, but we heard him cry again. Shadow didn't leap. He didn't whimper. He just tilted his head and lightly pressed his nose against Haley's hand, like he was saying, "Thank you." Haley wrapped her arms around his neck, resting against him momentarily. "Thank you for not leaving him. Thank you for believing we'd do our part." She didn't need an answer because the dog just sat there, still. But those eyes of an angel wrapped in mud and scars said everything. The rain hadn't stopped since midnight. Drops tapped relentlessly against the hospital's expansive emergency room windows, like a warning that wouldn't quit. Inside St. Meadow General hummed with quiet urgency, IVs, blinking nurses, murmuring soft beeps from heart monitors echoing down the halls. But everyone's gaze kept drifting toward the closed door of Trauma Room 2, where a newborn wrapped in a soaked jacket was fighting for his life. And just outside that door, the black dog remained. Shadow hadn't moved since the baby was taken inside. His drenched fur clung to his bony frame. His whole body quivered from the cold, but his deep eyes never wavered from that door. No barking, no whimpering, just a silent vigil as if he knew exactly where he was and why he was there. Nurse Haley Quinn stood a few feet away, her chest aching. She'd offered him water. He refused. She knelt and spoke to him gently. Shadow only blinked slowly as if to whisper, "I'm not done yet." "You are a little angel, huh?" Haley whispered, her voice trembling. Curiosity soon turned into action. Security staff began scanning camera footage. The night shift gathered around the grainy monitor, half-empty coffee cups in hand, and at 3:02 a.m. there he was. Shadow was limping in from the west lot. No people, no car, no leash, just a dog, soaked and slow, carrying something bundled in a coat. One guard frowned, rewinding the tape. Still no one else. They rewound the footage to earlier frames. Still no one. Shadow had come alone. "I've got goosebumps," one of the security guards whispered. Haley glanced over at Dr. Park. The normally stone-faced physician clenched his jaw. "Call the police," he said quietly. Less than an hour later, two officers arrived, Officer Riley and Investigator Sloan. While the medical team remained laser-focused on keeping the baby alive, the officers began looking into Shadow. The on-call vet scanned for a microchip. Nothing. No eye, no tracking tag, just a faint, faded tattoo inside the ear. "It's a rescue shelter code," Riley said, kneeling for a closer look. "Greenfield Shelter. Not far from here." Sloan immediately scribbled notes and called dispatch. Within minutes, the shelter's records came through 2 years ago. A woman named Claire Navarro adopted a black mixed-breed dog named Shadow Male, about 3 years old, noted for his calm demeanor and gentle nature with children. "Is there a current address?" Haley called out from the back. Sloan nodded. "About a 15-minute drive. But here's the thing," Claire reported. "Shadow missing 4 months ago." "That's strange," Dr. Park murmured. "That dog, he knew exactly what he was doing." Haley couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. It was like something around Shadow had shifted. He carried more than a name, he took a purpose. "What about Claire? Anyone reach her yet?" "We're trying," Sloan replied, "but her number's disconnected." Outside, the rain kept pounding the windows as Sloan stepped away to contact nearby patrol units. Inside, Haley returned to Shadow, kneeling beside him again. "Where did you come from, little one?" she whispered. "You brought that baby to us." Shadow lifted his head slightly, blinking slowly. In those eyes, an entire world. And then, under the still falling rain, a call came through to the St. Meadow emergency desk. Haley was checking the baby's IV drip when she heard one of the officers gasp. They found her, Claire Navarro. The mystery woman tied to Shadow had been discovered inside a partially burned warehouse on the edge of the West Industrial Zone. She was unconscious, curled on the cold floor, hair matted with ash and rain, her body frail from hunger. "If they'd arrived just a few hours later, she might not have made it," one rescue worker murmured. "They brought her to the very same hospital where her baby now lay recovering. When Dr. Park and Haley saw Claire on the stretcher, pale-faced, limbs icy, they knew this was the woman they'd been waiting for all night." Hours later, Claire stirred beneath the soft hospital light, her eyes glassy and dull. She didn't speak at first. She just turned her face and exhaled weakly. Haley took her hand gently. "You're safe now. Everything's going to be okay," she whispered. When Claire's vitals stabilized and fluids had been administered, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse, as though each word was scraped from the bottom of despair. "My baby. Where's my son?" Haley squeezed her hand. "He's recovering. He's a fighter." Claire broke down, sobbing into the damp pillows, tears mixing with ash and rain. I lost everything, she cried. Our home, our savings. When my husband died, I didn't know how to care for him. I tried, I did. Just then a nurse entered with the tattered coat Shadow had used to wrap the baby. Claire recognized it instantly. It had belonged to her late husband. She clutched it to her chest like it held a piece of his soul. Shadow, she whispered between sobs. I wrapped my baby in that coat. I told him to find help. I didn't think he'd actually. No one in the room spoke. They didn't have to. Every gaze turned toward the dog, now curled in the corner of the hallway, his eyes closed, his breathing slow. Later, the investigation confirmed it all. Claire had been evicted a week ago. She and her baby had taken shelter in an abandoned warehouse with no family and no one to turn to. That night, weak and slipping into unconsciousness, Claire managed to wrap her child in the coat, nestle him beside Shadow, and whisper her final plea, find help. And Shadow had done the impossible. That dog, injured, cold, and alone, ran more than 4 miles through the pouring rain, across slippery train tracks, over waterlogged fields toward the only light in the darkness, St. Meadow Hospital. He didn't know maps, he didn't understand the word emergency, but he knew life was hanging by a thread, and he didn't stop until that thread was safely in human hands. When Claire was brought into the recovery room, Haley knelt beside Shadow and whispered, "You did it. You're a real hero." Shadow opened his eyes and looked toward the door, where the baby now slept peacefully in his mother's arms, safe after the storm. And then he closed his eyes again peacefully. Under a clear sky after the rain, the morning sunlight gently streamed through the window of room 207 at St. Meadow Hospital. A tiny baby slept quietly in his mother's embrace inside the softly lit room. His skin had turned rosy again, his breathing steady. No sign left of the night he had nearly slipped away. Claire opened her eyes, her head still heavy, but her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. In the chair beside her, Haley smiled gently. And curled up beneath that chair like a bundle of quiet warmth was Shadow. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched his back. The dog lifted his head, calm eyes meeting hers, as if to say, everything's all right now. Claire began to cry, but this time out of gratitude. You saved him, and you saved me too, she whispered. But Shadow and the baby's story didn't end within the hospital walls. Just hours after police released the details, local headlines spread like wildfire. Dog leads hope through the storm. The story was picked up statewide. National TV anchors told it with awe. Reporters swarmed the hospital. Yet through all the flashing cameras and microphones, Shadow remained steady, loyal and untouched by fame. He stayed beside Claire and the baby, standing guard like a quiet soldier. That Saturday morning, the city's mayor visited the hospital. In a modest but heartfelt ceremony, he knelt and placed a small silver medal around Shadow's neck, engraved with, "For bravery beyond words, City of Stonebridge." We have many heroes, the mayor said, voice thick with emotion, but not many who walk on 4 legs, with a heart that never gives up. Claire carried her baby into the hospital's main lobby. Shadow walked beside her, still damp in patches, but with bright, unwavering eyes. Outside, hundreds of townspeople had gathered. They clapped and held up handmade signs. Thank you, Shadow. Real heroes have tails, and you're our angel. An elderly carpenter stepped forward, laying a hand on Claire's shoulder. We're fixing your house, he said. This town doesn't let a mother start over alone. And they did. Just days later, Claire, baby Noah, and Shadow moved into a small house on the town's edge, donated and lovingly restored by the people who had wept reading about them in the main hallway of St. Meadow Hospital, right where Shadow had once sat all night outside the ER doors. A small bronze plaque was installed. Some angels wear fur. Beneath it, a photo of Shadow, steady gaze, floppy ears, and baby Noah bundled beside him in that old tattered coat. From time to time, nurses still pass that plaque and smile. That's the story that made us believe in miracles again, Haley told a new intern, and reminds us that hope sometimes walks in on 4 muddy paws. On a still Sunday afternoon, Claire sat on her porch, Noah sleeping soundly against her chest, and Shadow lying nearby, head resting on her leg like always. She gently stroked his back and whispered, "We're safe now." Shadow didn't respond. He closed his eyes and listened to the heartbeat he'd protected through miles of storm. And so they lived, 3 souls once broken, now pieced back together into a family. Not perfect, but complete in the most beautiful way. As the sun set behind the roof of their little house at the edge of town, its final light fell softly on three quiet figures: a mother, a sleeping child, and a teen who never once looked away. No more storms, no more fire. Just the kind of peace you have to fight your way toward. Shadow, a dog who once had nothing but instinct and loyalty, became a living symbol of unconditional love. Claire, a mother who thought she had lost everything, found family and a new beginning. And Noah, the infant, who had once gasped for life in the cold, now rested in a cocoon of wordless love from both a human heart and a four-legged soul. We may not understand the language of animals, but Shadow's actions said everything: love, courage, and never giving up. Thank you for staying with us to the end of this story. If you believe that warm human and canine stories like this deserve to be shared, please hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and send this video to someone you care about. Because sometimes a small story can change how we see the world. And sometimes the truest angels walk on four paws and know how to bark. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the following story.